Hi, my name's Eric, and I'll be reading you selections from today's Cape Cod Times, dated Monday, March 16th of 2026. We'll start with weather, as we always do, and across the Cape and Islands today, windy with periods of rain expected. A high of 55 this afternoon, gonna rain all day. Tonight, windy with heavy rain and thunderstorms. A low of 41 in the overnight. It gets a little chillier Tuesday and Wednesday this week. Tomorrow, breezy, a shower early in the morning, a high of 45, that's pretty normal, but then a low of 22 in the overnight. Bring your plants in if you brought them out. On Wednesday, mostly sunny and cold, a high of 35, a low of 25. On Thursday, mostly cloudy, not as cold, high of 42, a low of 34. And on Friday, partly sunny, high of 48 and a low of 35. The sun will rise today at 6:51 a.m. It'll set at 6:49 p.m. We'll have 11 hours, 58 minutes of daylight. Now, heading to the front of the paper, where normally they used to keep the mass lottery results, and we read these because somebody asked for them. If there's something you would like read to people who are blind or print disabled, you can email us at info@audiblelocalledger.org or call us at 508-539-2030 and we'll consider reading it. And if you miss any of the information that we share in our readings, you can always go to audiblelocalledger.org, fully disability compliant website. Click on the Listen tab and you'll find 150 chronologically maintained readings under All Reads to the Blind. And as we read new ones, the bottom ones come off, so the newest are at the top of the list, and you can catch up on anything that you might have missed. We also keep a wide variety of periodicals and literature up there for your listening pleasure, as well as shopping guides, which are brought up on Friday and play through the weekend so you know what's on sale at the supermarket. All of that is free for people who are blind or print disabled at audiblelocalledger.org. For the latest results, we go to masslottery.com because the Cape Cod Times goes to press too early and doesn't publish the numbers anymore. But you asked for them, so we'll give them to you. The numbers game for Sunday, March 15th, the Ides of March of 2026, in the midday drawing, the numbers were 5, 0, 7, 2. Again, yesterday's midday drawing of the numbers game, 5072. In the evening drawing last night of the numbers game, the results were 7070. Again, last night's evening drawing results of the numbers game, 7070. Good luck to all who play, and remember us if you win. From the front page of today's Cape Cod Times, meet the sandwich man living on an erosion-threatened beach by Zane Razak. In East Sandwich, Michael Potty watched the house next door collapse onto Spring Hill Beach during a storm, after years of crashing waves weakening its foundation. The collapse came during a series of fierce storms that blasted Saltmarsh Road homes a few years ago, erasing stretches of the already eroding coastline. His family used to own that house, and it held decades of personal history. For Pottery, who's now 71 years old, the moment was an unsettling reminder of the erosion that continues to carve away his neighborhood by Spring Hill Beach. Having lived year-round on the road since the 80s, which is a rarity, he said his decades of memories have anchored him there and turned battles with erosion personal. His cherished flagpole remains, although he has had to search for it on the beach after a storm. And Potty didn't plan to go anywhere anytime soon. I'd like to think that I pass it on to my children and grandchildren, right? I'm not sure that will happen, Potty said. I'm thinking the odds are against it. The Cape Cod Regional Policy Plan of 2025 highlights coastal erosion as a top concern among Cape residents who completed a survey, second only to affordable housing. The Times is taking a deep dive into coastal erosion issues on Cape Cod and Nantucket. Spring Hill Beach, along with Town Neck Beach to the west, are two beaches in Sandwich most identified with decades of erosion after the construction of jetties at the Cape Cod Canal. A 100-year history by Spring Hill Beach. Poddy's wife's grandfather bought land on Saltmarsh Road in 1925 from the Wings, and her father built the original cottage in 1950. His mother's side began coming to the area in the 1930s. He grew up visiting the beach as a child in the summer and met his wife there. He remembers climbing onto low-tide sandbars, fishing with his father and uncle, and leading scout cookouts on the shore. He and his wife raised their 2 children there and eventually built his dream house on the property. "I'm somewhat crazy about this beach," said Poddy. "It just means so much to me, and I'm not always sure that's a good thing." Today, he estimates that the beach, made up of private parcels, has retreated about 150 to 200 feet since he was young, guessing about 100 feet of that shoreline loss happened in the past 20 years. Saltmarsh Road can become impassable at times. The assessed values of the houses in the neighborhood range from $1 to $3 million. The often high-end beachfront cottages feature private decks or boardwalks, some damaged from recent storms, leading directly to Cape Cod Bay. During a walk around the waterside neighborhood, Poddy pointed to signs of erosion. Trucks hauled in mountains of sand to replenish eroded beaches and protect them from future storm surges. The sandbars have mostly vanished, leaving waves to crash straight into the shrinking beach, he said. A rusty pipe, once part of a 1920s kitchen, now pokes through the sand, 100 feet out on the beach. The tight-knit neighborhood feel has also faded, said Poddy. For example, one house is owned by a doctor who primarily lives off Cape and uses the property a handful of times a year, he said. Poddy said he and his wife debate whether another house nearby will become a permanent residence or if they're going to have an empty house that we only see the people once in a while. As for the house that collapsed onto the beach a few years ago, it sold in February for $3.3 million, according to the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds. Rules set limits on how residents can fight erosion. For instance, the use of hard structures like rocks or seawalls is generally not allowed, as it disrupts the natural movement of sand. Major work typically requires a permit from the Sandwich Conservation Commission. Instead, a popular method is planting beach grass to stabilize dunes. The grass roots keep sand in place and help trap new sand that's pushed in from storms and wind. Homeowners also install biodegradable coir envelopes, or coir, C-O-I-R, envelopes, or natural fiber barriers along the dunes to slow erosion while still allowing sand to shift naturally. After the February 23rd blizzard, which slammed Cape Cod with power outages, snow, and high winds, Poddy said waves washed out sand from around his stairs, and he toyed with the idea of adding sand back. Ultimately, he decided against it, saying he didn't want to damage his fragile beach grass roots with heavy machinery. Poddy said residents shoulder the cost of most efforts. Sand replenishment can cost around $100,000 after a major storm, he said. So what's the future? Erosion has forced Poddy to confront that this house won't be here forever. The expenses and the energy to maintain the property pile up, Poddy said, adding, "It's just what it takes to be out here. It's a way of life, and it's been my life," he said. "I don't know how you put your arms around all that, but it's what I do and what I am." And keeping it local, we'll move into the Cape and Islands section in this reading of the Cape Cod Times of today, March 16th of 2026, a Monday. Steve Heslip, who is the Cape Cod Times photojournalist, is usually published in the Cape and Islands section on Monday. It's under Photo Shoot, Remembrances from a 45-year career at the Cape Cod Times by Steve Heslip. So you just drive around and take pictures all day? I've been asked that question many times in my 45-year career as a newspaper photographer. The short answer, yes. But at the end of every shift, it wasn't lost on me. I got paid to bear witness to whatever might have happened on Cape Cod that day with a camera. What a privilege that's been. A dream job come true as I take a look back before I retire on Saturday, March 21st. The media landscape has changed dramatically since I washed ashore here in 1981. Arriving with a full year of newspapering under my belt from my hometown paper, the Hornell Evening Tribune, in upstate New York, I was living a freelance photographer lifestyle. And then I picked up a shift covering Saturdays for the Cape Cod Times. This was the era of IBM Selectric typewriters, film cameras shooting mostly black and white, and a darkroom that could accommodate 4 photographers. I secured a coveted staff photographer position in 1985. I started a family, and I settled down, as my father would say. Except, as a photojournalist, that never happens. It's a wild ride. Unpredictable schedules in any kind of weather, wherever the news takes you. When the blizzards arrived, my wife would be home stoking the wood stove to keep the kids warm as I was out taking photos. When Hurricane Bob blew through in August of 1991, I was out ahead of the storm down in Woods Hole, documenting the storm drama, finally getting back to the Hyannis office to run film late in the afternoon. Finally arriving home at night, soaking wet, my wife was out on the deck under a beach umbrella, hovering over a small hibachi grill, cooking up all the meat from the fridge ahead of a week-long power outage. It was one of the best meals of my life. The Martha's Vineyard presidential vacation years found Times staffers camped out in island fields for days on end for the occasional chance to race around the island in a presidential motorcade. Long days with small photo victories, but you felt on top of the world as you competed with a White House press corps every day. However, the average newspaper day presents what photographer Larry Niswander sums up best. The most difficult thing for a photojournalist to do, capture the unique in the ordinary. Easy to say, hard to accomplish every day. From the season's first snowdrops to right whales, breaking news to sporting events, and everything in between, that is the goal. I offer thanks to all who helped on my photo journey. My byline is under each image, but the support of so many has made each of those photographs possible. I'm not hanging up my cameras, I just won't be shouldering them every day. Keep in touch, hairslipPhoto@gmail.com, and keep following along on my Instagram journey at CCTPhoto. A final photo tip for success from Henry David Thoreau. It's not what you look at that matters. It is what you see. Our headline, Cape Codders are urged conserve water as stubborn drought persists. Now this is ironic to read while you're looking out the window or standing outside getting drenched or hearing the rain pounding on your roof, but it is true even after all the snow. And I think this was probably written before today or might have run on another day of the week. But anyway, Heather McCarron wrote this. February's blizzard buried Cape Cod under mounds of snow. But all that frozen precipitation didn't ease the drought that's plagued Massachusetts for 2 years. Because temperatures remained below freezing, much of that water stayed locked in snow and frozen ground, and on the recent warm days has run off into storm drains rather than soaking into rivers, ponds, and groundwater, according to state officials. As a result, residents on Cape Cod are being urged to conserve water as drought conditions continue across the state. Nantucket has imposed mandatory restrictions and fines for violations. Conditions are listed as normal for Dukes County. This drought has been building since 2024, and we're still seeing the effects in low stream flow and lower water levels across the state, Rebecca Tepper, Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, said in a statement. Even though we had a snowy February, it won't be enough to replenish the groundwater after such a long period of drought. Even when the snow melts, state officials said the 2 to 3 feet that fell in some areas during Winter Storm Hernando on February 22nd through 24th amounts to only about 2.5 inches of water. not enough to fully recharge rivers, lakes, ponds, and groundwater after months of below-average precipitation and substantial water deficits. Tepper has declared worsened drought conditions in several parts of the state after a state task force reviewed data from August 24 through the end of February 26. As of March 9th, Cape Cod's status stands at a level 2, significant drought. Nantucket improved slightly from a level 3 critical drought, declared in mid-February, but island leaders have placed the island under a mandatory level 2 drought condition. Unlike many parts of Massachusetts that rely on reservoirs or large regional water systems, most towns on Cape Cod and the islands depend almost entirely on groundwater drawn from local aquifers. That makes the region particularly sensitive to long stretches of dry weather, since rain and snow melt must seep through to replenish drinking water supplies. Across Cape Cod, many towns have already imposed restrictions, usually limiting outdoor watering and irrigation to certain days or hours. Nantucket's current restrictions go further, making conservation mandatory and imposing fines for violations. Several regions in the state have worsened from previous drought status. The central and northeast regions are now in a level 3 critical drought, according to the Energy and Environmental Affairs Office, while the Connecticut River Valley has moved to a level 2 significant drought, and western Mass is now in a level 1 mild drought. For that reason, Tepper said, it's important for everyone to be mindful of how we use water. Small actions can help protect our water supply while conditions recover. Cities and towns where significant drought has been declared are being urged to limit outdoor water use, including washing hard surfaces, vehicles, and boats. State officials hope warmer temperatures and rain expected this month could gradually help replenish water systems. Nantucket leaders issued an advisory on March 12th informing residents that effective immediately automatic irrigation of any kind, including drip irrigation, is prohibited. Residents may use handled hoses or watering cans only, and they must limit washing decks, sidewalks, driveways, and streets. Due to the severity of the drought currently occurring on island, the Nantucket Water Commission unanimously voted to establish fines for those on town water who violate the mandatory use restrictions, according to the March 12th alert. A first offense will result in a warning. A second violation carries a $250 fine, a third a $500 fine, and a fourth offense will result in water service being shut off to the property. The drought status on Nantucket will be reviewed monthly, officials said. Barnstable County hasn't issued any new drought advisories since the state agency's announcement, though county officials have continued outreach on groundwater conservation. In the past week, the Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment promoted a Groundwater Awareness Week event about Cape Cod's aquifer and water resources. Residents saw a presentation, The Unseen Lifeline, Groundwater's Role in Cape Cod's Ecosystem. The presentation examined how groundwater supports everyday life on Cape Cod, feeding rivers, ponds, wetlands, and marshes, coastal waters, and estuaries, as well as drinking water supplies. Under the state's drought management plan, agencies will monitor conditions and coordinate with towns, including local boards of health, to track effects, such as private wells running dry. Residents are encouraged to report wells that stop producing water to their local health board. State environmental officials said the Drought Management Task Force will meet again on April 7th to reassess drought conditions. Editorial note, Heather McCarron, HMCCARRON at CapeCodOnline.com, writes about climate change, environment, energy, science, and the natural world, in addition to news and features in Barnstable, Brewster, and Falmouth. There is one obituary in the Cape Cod Times dated today, March 16th, Monday of 2026. It's of Stephen Robert Simchak of South Yarmouth, who at the age of 76 peacefully went to be with the Lord on March 13th of 2026. Stephen served in the U.S. Marine Corps during the Vietnam War, Thank you, Mr. Simchak, for your service. When he returned home, he met and married Michelle Poirier, and they went on to have a son, Matt, and a daughter, Stacy. Several years later, Stephen went on to marry a second time to Nancy Hanan of Worcester, Mass., and had 2 daughters, Leah and Sarah. Stephen had several hobbies, but most notably a passion for motorcycles. Even after critical injuries, which included the loss of his left leg, he continued to ride. He was a member of the Leathernecks Motorcycle Club and enjoyed attending group rides on Cape Cod, such as Big Nick's ride. In his later years, he enjoyed the simpler things of life, such as attending Church of the Nazarene in Dennis, going for car rides to enjoy views of the Cape, and spending time with his family. He's survived by his loving daughters and son. He also leaves behind his former wives, Nancy and Michelle. In lieu of flowers, family requests that when someone tells you they love you, that you respond with, "I love you more," just as he would. He will always be remembered as a courageous and selfless hero, and above all, as a father. Again, keeping it local, we'll move to sports. The Monday publication is, the Monday edition is usually pretty light on local, and it's a half-hour reading as opposed to our normal 1 hour of the Cape Cod Times, but that may be changing soon. High school girls hockey, Cape and Islands League names their 25 and 26 All-Stars by Courtney Jacobs. This was one of the more competitive seasons for the Cape and Islands high school girls hockey season. 6 of the 7 teams made the postseason, and Dennis Yarmouth Cape Cod Academy, St. John Paul II, Falmouth, and Nauset Monomoy tied for the league championship. There were 17 players selected as All-Stars. DY, CCA, and JPH led the way with 4 selections, while their Nauset Monomoy, Sandwich BMC, and Falmouth were right on its heels with 3 players each. There was even an 8th grader that took home MVP honors. Here are the players that made this season one of the best on the Cape and Islands. League champions, there were 3. Dennis Yarmouth, Cape Cod Academy, St. John Paul II is one team, Falmouth, and Nauset Monomoy is the third. League sportsmanship was Barnstable, Upper Cape, Cape Tech. League MVP was Sammy Precourt of DY, CCA, and JPH. Now for the All-Stars. Kate Buckler, Paige Fowler, Carolyn O'Keefe, Riley Precourt, Sammy Precourt, Violet Cox, Maeve Turner, Hadley Vieira, Abigail Geary, McKenna Mittell, Eleanor Moan, Gabby Bassett, Sophie Eldridge, Julia Kipperman, Anya Kelsch, Casey Pastelli, Elizabeth Stutzman. Honorable mention: Emma Da Silva, Ellie Collette, Raylyn Spellman, Hannah Wansitwich, Morgan Willis, Chloe Schultz. Individual sportsmanship: Brooke Smith, Alina Manuel, Giada DiTacchio, Hannah Wansewich, Nora Swanson, and Ainsley Hopwood. Congratulations to all the All-Stars and honorable mentions. And we'll close with a little bit of advice from Asking Carolyn. Expected to show up for family who never show up for you. Dear Carolyn, what are the rules around showing up for family? I'm the youngest, so I got lucky when my mom showed up to my events. My parents always told me to show up and be supportive for my siblings, but when I expected the same, they said, "Your siblings are busy. You need to respect their time. You're the youngest, so that's life. They don't need to show up to show they love you." When I hit my 20s, a kind therapist let me off the hook, so I quit showing up for my family altogether unless it was the holidays. Now my brother's annoyed that I'm not interested in his upcoming wedding and fatherhood milestones. I've got my own family, and I'm busy. Last night I texted him, "I'm showing up for you as much as you've ever shown up for me." He never responded, but I'm getting grief from the others. Is there a nicer way to tell him that showing up is 99% of life? Signed, Youngest. Dear Youngest, that's some serious anger from childhood. Your parents gave you a badly mixed message, and the result, no surprise, was just bad. They called it your duty to show up for your older sibs, which is fine unto itself, good values, but hold your sibs? They didn't to any obligation. A terrible message. Better if your parents had simply admitted they couldn't or wouldn't, say, leave you home alone. As bad as it sounds, so that's life, is real. I'm a youngest myself. When the kids outnumber the adults, it usually means there's one kid participating in something and at least one other along for the ride, forced to kill an afternoon someplace they'd rather not be. Does it always mean the older star and the youngers get dragged along? No, but firstborns take priority for sure, just by getting there first. My point being, sure, blame your parents for their bad logic and or culture. If your mom didn't even show up for you, then that's cruel. But it seems dissonant to blame the older kids for birth order and their advantage in a culture your parents created. Next, can you carry that framing with you into your adult sibling relationships instead of defensiveness and a grudge? Would that change how you feel and talk to them? If they've carried their indifference or disrespect for you into adulthood, then that's on them. They were kids too, after all. Had you been the older one, then you might have blown off their events too with your parents' permission or encouragement. To answer your question, there are no rules around showing up for family, so why not use that? And think about forgiveness as a way to wipe the emotional slate. You were all just kids, with parents making choices that fostered resentments. Rules come with expectations, enforcement, and scorekeeping, all recipes for a constricted and angry emotional landscape. A loving emotional landscape is one where you can open your arms and say, hey, I may not get back what I give, but at least I'm deciding where I want to show up and choosing to reject the roles we were given as kids. And with that advice, we've come to the end of our reading of the Cape Cod Times for today, Monday, rainy Monday, March 16th of 2026. This is your reader, Eric, saying be well, be safe, look after each other, and remember our veterans, especially those we've lost recently. Bye for now.